The loudest laughs always come from people who are terrified you'll prove them wrong. That's where this begins, not with an apology, not with an explanation, but with the sound of their confidence cracking. Because while they were busy laughing, labeling, dismissing, and treating you like a walking punchline, they didn't realize they were handing you the sharpest fuel there is. Contempt, underestimation, disrespect. You didn't just survive it, chosen one. You learned how to turn it into leverage. So let me say it plainly and let it land where it hurts the most. They thought they had you figured out. Turns out they never even read the room. Welcome in, my dear chosen ones. Sit down or stand tall, it doesn't matter. What matters is this: we're not warming up, and we're not softening the edges. This message isn't about healing their feelings. It's about sharpening yours. This is about what happens when someone lets the world believe they're a joke, long enough to flip the whole damn table and walk away while everyone else is still laughing at yesterday. You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when the noise around you started to fade, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped chasing approval like it was oxygen. That strange calm that showed up right before everything changed. You didn't announce it, you didn't post about it, you didn't make a scene. You just stopped asking for permission to exist at full volume. And suddenly, the same people who used to talk over you started choosing their words carefully, like one wrong sentence might expose how wrong they were about you. Let's answer the question they never stop asking in their heads. What changed? You did. Quietly, strategically, without asking them for a damn thing. Chosen ones, before we go any further, lock this moment in. If this message hit you, if it put pressure on your chest or words to thoughts you've been carrying in silence, then support this movement right now. Hit the like button and subscribe, not out of habit, but as a signal. A signal that this kind of energy, this kind of truth, this kind of unapologetic fuel deserves to keep coming. Every like tells the algorithm to push this message further. Every subscription keeps this channel alive and sharp, focused on bringing you content that doesn't just motivate, but changes how you move through life. You're not just supporting a video, you're backing a voice built for the underestimated. Chosen ones, understand this. Power doesn't always kick the door in. Sometimes it changes the locks while everyone's still inside. You didn't get louder, you didn't beg to be seen, you didn't argue with people who had already decided you were small. You became undeniable, and nothing hits harder than watching someone succeed without needing your approval, your permission, or your applause. They called you too much. Funny how too much looks exactly like confidence once it stops asking to be liked. They said you were unrealistic. Funny how reality adjusted when you stopped shrinking. They treated your name like it had no weight. Now they say it differently, slower, like it might bite back. And don't get it twisted, chosen one. This wasn't luck. This wasn't timing. This was pressure doing its job. Every night you doubted yourself, every room where you were ignored, every relationship where you gave more than you got, every job that drained you, every fake smile from people who only liked you when you stayed small. That wasn't weakness, that was training. You were being conditioned to outgrow environments that couldn't hold you. You might be wondering, why did they mock me so hard? Why did they underestimate me so confidently? Because people don't belittle what feels harmless. They belittle what threatens their comfort. They laugh at what they don't understand, and they dismiss what reminds them of everything they were too afraid to become. Here's the part they hate admitting. You scared them before you ever realized you had teeth. They saw the spark before you trusted it. They sensed the potential while you were still learning how to carry it. That's why they tried to downplay you. That's why they spoke sideways. That's why they tried to box you in with labels. Not because you were weak, but because you were unfinished and unpredictable. Then came the shift. The moment you stopped begging for a seat and built your own table. The moment you let results speak instead of defending your worth. the moment you walked away without slamming the door. Silence, chosen one, hurts more than noise ever could, because silence leaves people alone with the truth. While they laughed, you upgraded. While they slept, you planned. While they talked, you studied. They thought you were healing quietly. They didn't realize you were evolving into someone they were never equipped to handle. You let them think you were the joke. You let them believe the story they told about you, all while you were learning their patterns, noting their weaknesses, and preparing your exit. Now look at them, watching, whispering, replaying old conversations in their heads, wondering where they miscalculated, wondering how the person they tried to break became the one they can't ignore, can't outrun, can't rewrite. So if you're feeling that pressure in your chest right now, that recognition that says, this isn't just a video, this is a mirror, good. That's not coincidence, that's clarity. This is for the chosen ones who were underestimated, mislabeled and laughed at, and still showed up sharper. They thought you were the joke. You flipped the damn table. And this time, nobody's laughing. And before we move forward, pause right here with me for a second. If this message feels personal, if it feels like it's describing moments you never talked about out loud, that's not random. That's recognition. So support this movement right now. Hit like, subscribe, and let the system know this kind of truth deserves space. Drop 77 in the comments as a mark that you're done being treated like a joke and ready to stand in your real weight. This channel exists to keep pressure on the world that underestimated you. And now, chosen ones, we go step by step. Pay attention. If you're really built for this, what comes next will feel uncomfortably familiar. Let's get started. Number 1. The quiet strategy that collapsed their confidence from the inside. You let them play smart while you built the exit. They thought they were teaching you the game. They didn't realize you were studying the players. Now listen closely, my dear chosen ones, because this is where the real damage started. This is the part they never recovered from. Not the moment you spoke up, not the moment you won, not even the moment you walked away. It began much earlier, when they were convinced you were harmless, when they were comfortable, when they relaxed around you and let their guard drop. That was the mistake that cost them everything. They laugh loud about storms they can't see forming. They mistake noise for awareness and confidence for intelligence. While they were busy flexing their opinions, their labels, their fake authority, you were doing something far more dangerous. You were watching, you were listening, you were learning patterns. You weren't absorbing their words. You were dissecting their behavior. And that right there is where the power imbalance quietly flipped. Chosen ones, let's address the question sitting heavy in your mind right now. Why didn't I fight back? Why didn't I defend myself when they underestimated me? Why did I stay quiet while they talked down to me? Because arguing with people who already decided you were small is like swinging at smoke. You don't waste energy trying to convince blindness to see. You let it walk straight into the wall it refuses to acknowledge. They thought your silence meant confusion. They thought your calm meant submission. They thought your patience meant weakness. But silence was your workshop. While they were performing, you were constructing. While they were chasing quick wins, you were mapping long-term outcomes. While they were winning arguments, you were building leverage. They mistook restraint for ignorance, and that miscalculation became their downfall. Here's what really happened. You let them feel smarter than you. You let them feel taller by standing lower. You let them feel superior while you quietly measured the depth of their insecurity. They played expert. You played student. But you weren't studying their advice. You were studying their ego. You were clocking how easily they needed validation, how fragile their confidence became when you stayed calm, how desperate they were to feel above someone, anyone. Chosen ones, understand this truth clearly. People reveal everything about themselves when they believe you don't matter. They speak freely, they posture recklessly. They expose the cracks they work so hard to hide from equals. And you were never their equal in their minds, which gave you access they didn't even realize they were handing over. They bragged about small victories. You logged information. They made jokes at your expense. You stored patterns. They dismissed your ideas. You watched how threatened they felt by potential they didn't understand. They thought you were entertained. You were dissecting. They thought you were learning. You were cataloging. You weren't slow, you were precise, you weren't lost, you were patient, you weren't confused, you were calculating, and that's what makes this hit so hard. They weren't defeated by force, they were undone by their own arrogance. Let me say this plainly for every chosen one who needs to hear it. You didn't survive them by accident. You survived by awareness. You learned when to speak and when to let silence do the damage. You learned that people expose their weakest points when they think they're in control. You learned that the loudest confidence usually hides the shallowest foundation. And yes, they needed you small. They needed you unsure. They needed you doubting yourself so they could keep breathing comfortably inside their fragile sense of superiority. Your calm unsettled them. Your composure irritated them. Your refusal to react starved them of the reaction they needed to feel powerful. While they were swinging with insults, you were mapping the structure of their insecurity. While they were chasing attention, you were building self-control. While they were obsessed with winning the moment, you were preparing to outgrow the entire room. That's the difference between amateurs and architects. Amateurs want applause. Architects want permanence. Chosen ones, this is the part that really breaks them. You let them believe they were the main character because you already saw the ending. You saw that their confidence depended on someone staying beneath them. You saw that their identity required an audience. You saw that without noise, without attention, without someone to look down on, they collapsed inward. They didn't just underestimate you, they assumed you were finished evolving. That assumption is lethal, because people like that don't understand growth unless it's loud. They don't respect progress unless it's announced. They don't recognize danger unless it's obvious. You became the quiet threat they never prepared for. And now look at them. Replaying old conversations, rewriting history in their heads, pretending they always believed in you, suddenly respectful, suddenly curious, suddenly interested. Not because they changed, but because the version of you they dismissed no longer exists. So ask yourself this, chosen one. Did I really have a plan? Yes. Your plan was survival. Your plan was awareness. Your plan was discipline. Your plan was becoming so mentally solid, so emotionally controlled, so strategically patient that no insult could define you and no attack could derail you. You didn't flip the table because you wanted revenge. You flipped it because you outgrew the room. Revenge screams. Growth doesn't need to. The loudest punishment is success that doesn't acknowledge the people who doubted you. This is the blueprint they never saw coming. This is the structure you built behind their backs. This is the foundation laid brick by brick with every dismissal, every joke, every moment they thought you were nothing. You let them think you were a joke. You let them laugh, you let them relax, and then you stood up. And trust me, chosen ones, this was only the first move. Number 2. The silence they mistook for weakness until it became a weapon. You went quiet, and that's when you became dangerous. They laughed at your silence because they thought nothing was happening. Turns out that was the sound of the trap being built. My dear chosen ones, this is the part they truly underestimated. Not your skill, not your intelligence, your quiet. They mocked it, they joked about it. They mistook it for fear, confusion, hesitation, and that single mistake is why they never saw you coming. Real power doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't announce upgrades. It doesn't perform for approval. Real power moves in silence, like a loaded mechanism waiting for the exact moment to shift the entire field. And you, chosen one, embodied that long before you had the words for it. While they were busy flexing crumbs and celebrating tiny wins like they were historic, you were somewhere else entirely, building something that required patience they didn't have, discipline they couldn't tolerate, and emotional control they were never strong enough to develop. They thought your quiet meant defeat. They thought your distance meant you were lost. They thought your stillness meant you froze. But stillness is not the absence of movement. Stillness is compression. It's the moment before release. A blade rests before it cuts. A storm calms before it hits. And you weren't idle. You were gathering force. Chosen ones, ask yourself honestly, how many times did people talk louder just to feel important? How many times did they need eyes on them, reactions from them, applause from someone, anyone, just to believe they mattered? People who can't handle silence are usually running from themselves. Noise distracts them from the truth. Silence exposes it. That's why they feared it without even realizing it. They needed attention to feel relevant. You needed focus to become lethal. Maybe you've asked yourself this already. Why did my growth happen behind the scenes? Why was I always the quiet one? Why didn't I evolve loudly like everyone else? Because loud growth gets sabotaged. Loud plans get interrupted. Loud confidence attracts interference. Silence protects what's still forming. You don't pull a seed out of the ground every day to check if it's growing. You don't rush the blade while it's being forged. You let pressure do its work in private. While they slept peacefully in their assumptions, you were sharpening. Every time you chose not to react, you were building control. Every time you held your tongue, you were stacking discipline. Every time you kept your plans to yourself, you were protecting a future they couldn't touch. Silent growth is terrifying to people when they finally see it, because it proves you didn't need them. Not their approval, not their validation, not their permission. They thought they were getting stronger every time they looked down on you. They thought they were winning every time they mocked you and you didn't respond. What they didn't realize was that every insult became fuel, every laugh became resistance training, every dismissal became another brick in the structure you were building in the dark. Imagine a battlefield where everyone is swinging wildly at shadows, convinced they're winning because they hear their own noise. Meanwhile, you're in the background forging a weapon so precise it only needs one strike. That was you. You were building accuracy while they were swinging ego. You were building longevity while they were chasing applause. You were preparing permanence while they celebrated temporary illusions. Silence made you unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. People can prepare for loud enemies. Loud enemies telegraph every move. Quiet ones don't. Loud enemies want to look strong. Quiet ones become strong. The moment you stopped explaining yourself, your power became untouchable. You stopped defending. You stopped performing. You stopped caring about their reactions. You locked in. While they were trying to impress rooms they didn't even control, you were mastering yourself. While they were spreading their energy thin, you were stacking yours with intention. And when people wondered, why didn't we notice the change? It's because transformation isn't a public event. No one witnesses the moment steel becomes a blade. No one sees the exact second pressure creates something unbreakable. But silence didn't just build you, it exposed them. When you stopped talking, they started revealing. When you stopped reacting, they lost control. When you stopped chasing, their fake dominance collapsed. In their noise, they showed every insecurity they tried to hide. Now look where you stand, chosen one. You're the presence they didn't account for, the calm that shifts the room, the strength that doesn't announce itself. Your silence speaks louder than their entire identity ever did. They used to laugh at your quiet. Now they don't know how to read it. They used to think silence meant surrender. Now they understand it meant preparation. You didn't build yourself to impress them. You built yourself to outgrow them. And you did. Remember this. Your silence was never empty. It was loaded. It was deliberate. It was the birthplace of the power they never prepared for. And the most poetic part? You were silent then. Now they are. Number 3. The exact moment. Their reality couldn't keep up with you. The day the script broke and their reality stuttered, they didn't notice you changing because they were too busy assuming you never would. Chosen ones, this is the moment that lives rent-free in their heads. Not the argument, not the victory, not the exit. This was the second their reality glitched and they didn't have the tools to fix it. It's wild how someone can look at you every day and still miss the exact instant you become someone they can't handle. That's because real shifts don't announce themselves. They don't ring bells. They don't ask for witnesses. They happen quietly, and by the time anyone notices, it's already too late to stop them. This wasn't a scene. It wasn't dramatic. There were no speeches, no raised voices, no obvious rebellion. It was a blink, a silent snap, a microscopic adjustment in how you carried yourself that tilted the entire room without a sound. 1 second you were the version of yourself they felt safe mocking, and the next you were standing there with an energy that made their confidence fold like cheap cardboard. Picture it clearly. They walk into the same space expecting the same script, same reactions, same easy version of you, same control. But something's off. You're standing there calm, not passive, not nervous, just still in a way that feels dangerous, like the air right before lightning hits. Your eyes don't search for approval anymore. They don't ask. They assess. They calculate. They move with intention. And suddenly the room feels smaller around them. Your posture said everything before your mouth ever opened. I'm not here to fit in. I'm not here to perform. I'm not here to play the role you assigned me. And for the first time they felt it, the punch of their own mistake, the quiet terror of realizing they misjudged the wrong person. And the question started looping in their mind. What changed? They already knew the answer. You did. Chosen ones, let this land. You didn't change to impress them. You didn't evolve to prove a point. You didn't sharpen yourself for revenge. Something in you simply snapped in the healthiest way possible. You got tired of shrinking to keep insecure people comfortable. You got tired of laughing at jokes that insulted your own intelligence. You got tired of offering respect to people who couldn't even carry their own self-worth without tearing someone else down. Your voice changed too, didn't it? Not louder, cleaner, straighter, more precise. You stopped padding your sentences with apologies. You stopped checking faces mid-sentence to see if you were allowed to finish your thought. You spoke like someone who no longer needed permission to exist in the room. That kind of confidence doesn't shout. It hits like pressure, slow, heavy, unavoidable. And here's what really broke their internal wiring. You didn't warn them. You didn't hint at it. You didn't ease them into the new version of you. You didn't give them time to adjust or prepare. You evolved behind their backs. And evolution doesn't send invitations. Growth doesn't knock politely. It breaks doors and keeps moving. By the time they noticed, you were already levels above the version of you they memorized. That's why their stomach dropped. They recognized you, but they didn't. This wasn't the same person they joked about. This wasn't the same one they dismissed or spoke over. This wasn't the same one they underestimated. This was someone their disrespect accidentally trained, someone their doubts sharpened, someone their insults hardened into something unmanageable. Chosen ones, evolution isn't gentle. It's abrupt. It's irreversible. It doesn't care about comfort zones or old dynamics. Once it happens, there is no going back to who you were to make other people feel safe again. And that's what scared them the most. Not your success, not your confidence, The fact that the version of you they controlled no longer existed. They felt it before they could name it. The hierarchy shifted. The balance cracked. The room recalibrated around you. Suddenly, they didn't know where to place you anymore. And when people can't categorize you, they panic. Because control depends on predictability, and you stopped being predictable. This wasn't a glow-up. This was a warning they were too late to read. A silent announcement that the story they wrote about you was obsolete. You didn't just shift your energy. You became the plot twist that wrecked their entire worldview. And here's the truth they can't escape. Chosen ones. They didn't miss the moment you changed because it was invisible. They missed it because they never believed you were capable of it. And that assumption cost them everything. You let them think you were a joke. Then you stood up, and their world stuttered trying to catch up. Number 4. The first time your words carried authority. They couldn't interrupt. When you finally spoke, and the room lost its backbone. Nothing rattles false confidence faster than truth coming from the one they trained themselves to ignore. Chosen ones, this is the moment they never planned for. Not because it was loud, not because it was dramatic, but because it was precise. This was the second their illusion collapsed under its own weight. The moment you opened your mouth after being quiet for so long, the entire room shifted like a bad foundation, finally giving way. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't bang the table, you didn't perform. That's what makes it devastating. You simply spoke, calm, measured, certain. And suddenly, every fake smile froze mid-air like it forgot how to function. You could see it in their eyes before they tried to hide it. That split second of panic, that internal scramble. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had gotten comfortable with your silence. They built their confidence on it. They talked freely around you because they thought you wouldn't challenge the story they wrote. They assumed the quiet meant compliance. They assumed the calm meant submission. And when you finally spoke, it wasn't noise, it was weight. At first, they tried to laugh it off. They always do. A joke here, a forced chuckle there, a sideways glance, hoping someone else would jump in and shrink you back into the old version they preferred. They wanted to shove you back into the box they built for you, the one labeled harmless, the one labeled background, the one labeled won't ever say anything. But that box wasn't cracked. It wasn't damaged. It was gone, reduced to dust by the same pressure they applied, thinking it would break you. And you stepped out of it like someone who finally remembered the room didn't belong to them. Chosen ones imagine the scene clearly. They're relaxed, smug, certain they know exactly who you are and how far you'll go. And then you speak, not emotionally, not defensively, just facts, clean, undeniable. Each word slicing through their assumptions like a blade that doesn't need to swing twice. You weren't shaking, you weren't over-explaining, you weren't asking to be understood, you weren't softening the truth to protect their comfort. You were simply stating what is, and that's what destroyed the balance. Because facts don't negotiate. Facts don't apologize. Facts don't care about fragile egos. Here's what hit them hardest. This wasn't a new version of you. This wasn't a sudden personality shift. This was the original you. The one that existed before the dismissals, before the jokes, before the subtle control games, before you learned to second-guess yourself to survive the room. They didn't create your quiet. They only buried it under noise. They mistook your adaptability for weakness. They thought the calm was something they installed. They were wrong. Once you stripped away the performance, once you stopped cushioning their insecurities, once you stopped tiptoeing around their need to feel superior, the real you walked out without asking permission. And when truth finally leaves your mouth, chosen ones, it doesn't just get heard, it gets felt. It lands in the chest. That's why the room went silent. Not respectful silence, not thoughtful silence, destabilized silence, the kind that happens when people realize they just lost control of the narrative. In one sentence, you rewrote the power dynamic. Not because you demanded authority, but because you stopped agreeing to a version of reality that never fit you. You weren't asking anymore. You weren't playing along. You weren't participating in their imaginary hierarchy where they always sat higher and you stayed quiet. They wanted the old script. You deleted the file. You didn't fight their game. You refused to play. And that refusal flipped every invisible table in the room. Suddenly, you were the gravity. Calm, still, unmoved. And they were the scattered pieces, orbiting a force they no longer understood. Chosen ones, this is what happens when the underestimated finds their voice. Not a loud voice, a grounded one, not a reactive voice, a deliberate one. Your words didn't just silence them, they exposed them, exposed how much they relied on you staying quiet, exposed how fragile their authority really was, exposed how thin the story they built truly stood. And here's the part they'll never forget. You didn't stay to argue. You didn't wait for approval. You didn't explain yourself further. You spoke once, clearly, and let the silence do the rest. That soundless collapse is something they'll replay for years. Because once the quiet one speaks and doesn't back down, the room never feels safe the same way again, and they know it. Number 5. The fallout that forced everyone to drop the act when the smoke cleared and their masks hit the floor. Nothing exposes a lie faster than success that refuses to slow down. Chosen ones, this is the phase they never prepared for. Not your grind, not your silence, not even your rise. It's the aftermath that breaks them, the moment after the noise dies down, the moment the dust settles, the moment your success becomes permanent enough that it can't be dismissed as luck, timing, or a fluke. That's when the real comedy starts. Because here's the truth they can't outrun. Their identity was built on a version of you that no longer exists. At first, they laughed, then they doubted, then they ignored. And now they glitch. You can see it in their faces, chosen ones, that tight smile that doesn't reach the eyes, that laugh that comes a second too late, that sudden politeness layered over old disrespect. Panic has a frequency, and once you recognize it, you hear it everywhere. It hums under their compliments, it leaks through their fake support. They had you categorized, filed away, reduced to something manageable in their minds. The not serious one, the not ready one, the talks big but won't do much one. And when you stepped outside that box, their entire mental framework collapsed. Because people like that don't just misjudge others, they build their sense of superiority on it. When you outgrow the role they assigned you, you don't just succeed, you expose them. Chosen ones, notice how quickly the story changed. The same people who rolled their eyes at your ideas now claim they always saw something in you. The same ones who couldn't show up when you needed support suddenly speak like they were part of the plan. The same mouths that laughed at your dreams now want front row seats to your results. It's almost impressive how fast hypocrisy moves when relevance is on the line. They don't want you, they want proximity. They don't want truth, they want association. They don't want accountability, they want credit. This is where the masks come off. When the tables turn, actors panic. Suddenly, everyone wants to be a mentor, an advisor, a supporter, not because they changed, but because being near you now has value. Aligning with you makes them look smarter than they are. Claiming they believed in you early gives them a badge they never earned. They want access to the version of you they once tried to shrink. They want relevance in a story that no longer needs them. And maybe you've asked yourself, should I say something? Should I correct the record? Should I call them out? No, chosen ones. Silence already did the work. You remember everything, the tone, the side glances, the subtle smirks, the dismissive shrugs dressed up as advice, the fake concern that really meant stay where you are. You remember how they spoke to you when you had nothing to offer them. And they remember too. That's why they're uncomfortable now. That's why they overcompensate. That's why they avoid your eyes or stare a little too long. Your silence cuts deeper than confrontation ever could because it leaves them alone with the truth. They know exactly what they said. They know exactly what they did. Standing in front of the upgraded, you forces them to face the most painful realization of all. They bet against the wrong person. Chosen ones, this is why the aftermath is beautiful. Not because of revenge, not because of validation, but because exposure is unavoidable. Their lies surface, their panic shows, their desperation leaks through. And all you did was keep going. You didn't argue your worth. You didn't beg for belief. You didn't chase approval. You won. That's the part they can't rewrite. You didn't need to announce your arrival. Your presence did that for you. You didn't need to explain the journey. Your results did that for you. You didn't need to defend yourself. The contrast between who you were to them and who you are now did that for you. And here's the coldest truth of all. Chosen ones, some of them aren't angry. They're relieved. Relieved that you succeeded far enough away from them that they don't have to admit how wrong they were out loud. Others are furious because your growth invalidated the story they told themselves to stay comfortable. Either way, the masks are off and there's no going back. So let them scramble. Let them rewrite history in their heads. Let them pretend they were always on your side. You don't owe corrections. You don't owe explanations. You don't owe access. The aftermath already spoke. You let them think you were a joke. You flipped the damn table. And now they're left standing in the wreckage of their own assumptions, watching you walk forward without looking back. Number 6. How your progress triggered the anger they tried to hide. When your calm turned into the proof they couldn't deny. Nothing enrages a fragile ego faster than realizing the person they laughed at just outpaced them. Chosen ones, this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Not when you succeeded, not when you stood taller, but when their reaction exposed them. Because here's the truth they never prepared for. Your rise didn't just surprise them, it offended them. It broke an unspoken agreement they thought existed. In their minds, you were assigned a role, small, predictable, manageable. You weren't supposed to win, not like this, not at all. They had a script for you and you tore it up without asking. Your growth didn't fit their narrative, and that's why it hit them like a system error. They didn't just feel left behind, they felt exposed. Because your success didn't only elevate you, it highlighted their misjudgment. It forced them to confront an uncomfortable reality. They were wrong about you, and worse, they weren't as sharp as they believed themselves to be. Chosen ones, pay attention here. This is important. People don't get angry when you fail. They get angry when you succeed in a way that proves they misread you. Your progress shined a spotlight on their shallow evaluations, their lazy assumptions, their weak ability to see beyond surface-level confidence. You weren't supposed to be strategic. You weren't supposed to be disciplined. You weren't supposed to outthink them while they were busy underestimating you. So when you broke through the ceiling, they quietly built over your head. Something inside them snapped. Some of them lashed out, loudly, messily, predictably. They tried to smear your name because accepting your skill would hurt too much. They called you lucky because admitting your work ethic would collapse their excuses. They labeled you fake because acknowledging your authenticity would expose how much they've been performing. They said you changed because admitting you were always capable would crush the version of themselves that needed you to stay small. Understand this, chosen ones. People don't hate your evolution. They hate what your evolution proves about them. And then there were the others, the quieter ones, the ones whose anger didn't come out as noise but as silence. Because silence is what happens when the mind short-circuits, when the story they told themselves stops making sense. They didn't know how to process the fact that the person they treated like a footnote became the chapter they can't skip. They didn't know how to reconcile the past version of you with the present reality standing right in front of them. You became their glitch, their contradiction, their living evidence that their judgment isn't as sharp as they thought. Imagine it. Someone who once spoke to you like they were the authority on life, now replaying old conversations in their head, scrubbing through memories, analyzing moments, trying to pinpoint where they missed it, trying to figure out how the quiet one became the architect, how the one they talked over learned to outmaneuver them without ever raising their voice. And maybe right now you're asking yourself, why does their anger feel so personal? Why does my calm seem to irritate them more than any argument ever could? Here's why. Your calm is proof they can't fake. It tells a story they don't want told. It says you didn't need their approval to win. It says their opinions didn't age well. It says every insult they threw landed on someone who was quietly sharpening while they stayed exactly the same. Your peace exposes the truth that you were never competing with them in the first place. Chosen ones, this part matters. You weren't racing, you were building, and nothing dismantles a weak ego faster than realizing the person they looked down on was never looking back at them. You weren't chasing their validation. You weren't trying to be included. You weren't asking to be recognized. You were constructing something bigger while they were busy guarding imaginary status. That's why your peace feels like punishment to them, not because you're arrogant, not because you're loud, but because you moved forward without needing their permission, because you rose without their support, because you won without their validation. Their anger isn't your responsibility. Their discomfort isn't your burden, and your peace is not an apology. Let them be angry. Let them be confused. Let them be silent. Every reaction is just another confirmation that they misread the wrong person, that they underestimated someone who didn't need to announce their strength to become it. Chosen ones, you didn't just flip the table. You walked away while they were still arguing about whether you were allowed to stand up in the first place. And that realization, that's what cost them everything. Number 7, when access to you ended and power finally shifted. You changed the locks while they were still looking for the door. Access is the most expensive thing you own once you stop being free. Chosen ones, this is where the power becomes visible. Not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. There was a time when access to you cost nothing. Your energy was open, your presence was generous, your loyalty was automatic. People walked in and out of your life without earning a single step, tracking mud across your boundaries, testing your patience, taking without asking, doubting without consequence, and they mistook that openness for weakness. That was their second fatal error, because now the gates they use to stroll through are locked, not slammed shut in anger, not sealed with bitterness, locked with intention, controlled, reinforced, and suddenly the same people who treated you like an option are standing outside, confused, curious, uncomfortable, trying to figure out when the rules changed. Here's the part that still stings them. After the jokes, after the whispers, after the disrespect disguised as humor, after they treated your potential like a punchline, some of them came back. Soft voices, warm smiles, convenient memory, acting like nothing ever happened, acting like they didn't watch you struggle without lifting a finger, acting like they didn't doubt you out loud and then clap quietly when you proved them wrong. Chosen ones, understand this clearly. They didn't come back because they cared. They came back because your progress disrupted their comfort. Your growth made them uneasy. Your confidence made their old version of you useless. They returned not to reconnect, but to reattach themselves to something that suddenly had value. They want proximity, not connection. They want access, not accountability. They want to be near the outcome without respecting the process. They see the glow and think it's transferable. They sniff around your life like there's a shortcut hidden somewhere, like the discipline, the restraint, the late nights, the self-respect you built can be borrowed if they just get close enough. They want a seat at a table they tried to flip over before it was even built. But this time, chosen ones, you didn't open the door. You stood there, calm, clear, grounded, and you guarded your space like it mattered, because it does. When someone treats you like nothing and you rise anyway, your boundaries become the consequence. Not revenge, not drama. Boundaries. Quiet, immovable proof that access is no longer automatic. You learned discernment the hard way. You learned that curiosity after success isn't loyalty. You learned that support that arrives late isn't support at all. You learned that real alignment shows up when you're inconvenient, not when you're winning. Loyalty isn't found in words spoken now. It's found in behavior shown when there was nothing to gain. So you changed the rules. Access became earned, not assumed. Attention became selective, not scattered. Energy became protected, not available on demand. Your circle got smaller but sharper. Fewer people, stronger foundation. Less noise, more clarity. And suddenly, they weren't invited anymore. Not because you're bitter, because you're focused. Not because you hate them, because you respect yourself. And yes, chosen ones, this is the question that creeps in quietly. Should I let some of them back in? Should I give them another chance? No. Because they don't want you. They want what you represent now. They want your results without your discipline, your peace without your standards, your confidence without your scars. They want front row seats to a show they tried to cancel before opening night. Here's the most freeing realization of all. You don't need anything from them anymore. Not their apology, not their validation, not their approval, not their recognition. You outgrew the phase where someone else's opinion had the power to define who you are. You built yourself quietly. You rose without applause. You learned that closure isn't something other people give you. It's something you claim when you stop explaining your worth. While they're replaying old conversations, wondering where they misjudged you, trying to justify their past behavior, whispering about your change like it happened overnight, you're already moving forward. Bigger rooms, stronger alliances, foundations that don't include them, structures they can't even see, let alone enter. Chosen ones, this is the truth they're forced to swallow. The version of you they mishandled is gone. That was the last free pass, the last open gate, the last time access came without respect. Let them cope, let them wonder, let them knock. You reinforce the gates with standards, self-respect, and clarity. You're not hiding. You're protecting what you built. And while they stand outside trying to remember who you used to be, you're too busy becoming untouchable. Number 8. How staying underestimated. Let you rewrite the entire game. You stayed invisible while you rewrote the rules. They never saw you coming because they were too busy watching themselves. My dear chosen ones, this is the part of the story they still don't understand, even now. This is where the real advantage lived. Not in confrontation, not in loud dominance, but in the art of being unseen while the entire game was quietly rewritten beneath their feet. They mistook your calm presence for irrelevance. They mistook your restraint for limitation. And in doing so, they handed you the kind of access most people would kill for without ever realizing it. You didn't disappear by accident. You didn't fade because you lacked confidence. You engineered invisibility. You designed an environment where their egos felt so safe, so inflated, so unquestioned that they got sloppy. They relaxed around you. They overtalked. They overshared. They assumed you weren't paying attention. That assumption became their blind spot. Chosen ones understand this clearly. People reveal their weaknesses when they believe they're superior. They stop guarding their words. They stop filtering their intentions. They stop hiding their insecurities. And you let that happen. You let them believe they were the smartest in the room. You let them feel taller by standing a little lower. You let them feel wise by nodding at advice you had already outgrown. You let them feel powerful because power that needs validation is easy to manipulate. This wasn't submission. This was strategy. They basked in the glow of their imagined dominance while you quietly sharpened every edge they didn't know you had. They believed they were teaching you. In reality, you were studying them. You weren't learning their lessons. You were learning their limits. You were tracking who needed attention, who needed control, who needed an audience to feel relevant. You were watching patterns repeat, watching egos inflate, watching insecurity leak through cracks they didn't know were visible. And here's the truth they'll never admit out loud. You were never beneath them. You were beneath their radar. That's a very different position. Being beneath someone implies hierarchy. Being beneath the radar implies intelligence. It means you were operating in a space they didn't even know existed. They kept you close because you made them feel comfortable. You were the soft cushion under their confidence, the quiet listener who didn't challenge their narratives, the presence that didn't threaten their position. And that's exactly why you had freedom to move. While they were busy maintaining appearances, you were slipping through blind spots with surgical precision. Chosen ones, if you've ever asked yourself, was I too quiet? Was I too humble? Did I let people walk over me? Hear this clearly. Your silence was not humility. It was camouflage. You weren't hiding because you were afraid. You were hiding because they hadn't earned the right to see the blueprint you were building. Imagine a shadow in the corner of a room. No one notices it. No one questions it. No one suspects it. But the shadow sees everything. It sees the truth behind smiles. It hears the whispers that change tone when certain people leave the room. It notices alliances forming, motives shifting, insecurity leaking through arrogance. That shadow was you, watching, learning, storing information they handed over freely because they assumed you didn't matter. Quiet doesn't mean small. Quiet means calculating. While they spoke recklessly, you chose your moments. While they broadcasted their intentions, you protected yours. While they burned energy proving themselves, you conserved yours. And when the moment finally came, when you stepped forward with clarity and direction, the shift happened so fast their minds couldn't keep up. 1 second, you were the background character, the harmless presence, the one they underestimated without effort. The next second, you were standing at the center of the stage, fully formed, fully aware, fully unbothered. And they were left scrambling, trying to understand when the game changed, replaying conversations, searching for the moment they lost control. Strategic silence is dangerous because it allows growth without interference. It lets you rebuild yourself without commentary, without sabotage, without unnecessary resistance. It gives you room to evolve while everyone else is distracted by their own reflection. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't fight for attention. You let attention become irrelevant. You didn't demand respect. You let your presence redefine it. You didn't announce your rise. You let it interrupt them mid-sentence. Chosen ones, this is the power of being unseen. You became invisible in their story so you could become unstoppable in your own. And by the time they noticed the shift, it was already too late. The rules had changed. The table had been flipped. And they were still playing the old game, wondering how the joke they underestimated walked away holding the entire board. Number 9, the chain reaction. They never saw you were capable of. You didn't just rise, you distorted the entire field. They thought your growth would be quiet, They didn't realize it would rearrange the room. Chosen ones, this is where the impact went far beyond the people who laughed at you. This is the part nobody predicted because they were too busy watching the wrong angles. Power doesn't just upgrade the individual. Real power alters the environment. It bends conversations, rewires dynamics, and forces everyone within range to recalibrate whether they like it or not. And that's exactly what happened when you stopped shrinking. You didn't announce your transformation. You didn't broadcast it. You didn't seek validation for it. And that's why it landed so hard. Because when growth is real, it doesn't knock. It enters and everything else adjusts around it. Your change didn't stop at the ones who underestimated you. It rippled outward. It touched people who never spoke to you, never doubted you, never helped you. Suddenly, rooms felt different when you walked in. Suddenly, people who barely noticed you before were standing straighter, speaking more carefully, recalculating their tone. That's the shockwave they never saw coming. Think about it. You didn't throw a tantrum. You didn't make a scene. You didn't flip the table loudly. You flipped it energetically, like dropping a stone into still water. Not a dramatic splash, just precision. And precision creates ripples that travel far beyond the point of impact. The surface doesn't explode. It moves. Quietly, unstoppably. That was you. Chosen ones, this is what confuses them the most. Why are people reacting to me when I didn't say anything? Why does respect feel automatic now? Why do doors open without me begging? Because transformation announces itself without words. When you stop operating from insecurity, people can feel it before they understand it. Your posture changes, your eye contact changes, your pace changes. You don't rush. You don't fidget, you don't over-explain, and that absence of desperation speaks louder than any flex ever could. People started treating you differently, not because they knew your story, but because they felt the result. They didn't need details, they sensed the shift. Humans are wired to respond to confidence that doesn't need approval. They instinctively adjust around someone who looks like they belong wherever they stand. That's why conversations changed. Not louder, heavier. Your words carried weight because they weren't trying to prove anything anymore. And here's where the underestimators really lost control. People outside your original circle started noticing. People with no history with you, no bias, no past. They felt it too. Respect sharpened. Opportunities surfaced. Invitations appeared. Not because you magically became someone else, but because you finally stopped hiding the person you always were. Chosen ones, let's clear up another question echoing in your head. Why now? Why didn't this happen earlier? Because you were dimming yourself to survive environments that never deserved you at full power. You were compressing your presence so insecure, spaces could tolerate you. The moment you stopped doing that, the world adjusted, not out of kindness, out of alignment. You didn't walk differently to impress people. You walked like someone who knew where they were going. You didn't speak carefully to be liked. You spoke cleanly because you were clear. You didn't knock politely anymore because you realized you didn't need permission to enter rooms built for people exactly like you. That's when doors stopped resisting. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And this is the part they'll never admit. Your rise embarrassed more people than it inspired, not loudly, quietly, because it proved something uncomfortable. That confidence isn't rare. Commitment is, discipline is, self-respect is. And you embodied all three without announcing it. Chosen ones, understand this. When you stop hiding, reality stops hiding options from you. When you stop shrinking, space appears. When you stop asking, answers arrive. Not because life suddenly favors you, but because you're finally aligned with what you're capable of carrying. You didn't just level up, you became a reference point. People started measuring themselves differently around you. adjusting expectations, checking their posture, questioning their own excuses. That's the shockwave. You didn't need to challenge anyone. Your presence did it for you. Your transformation didn't change one thing. It changed the atmosphere. It changed the math. It changed the rules people thought were fixed. You flipped the damn table without touching it, and now everyone else is standing there pretending the floor didn't move. That's what real power does. Chosen ones. It doesn't shout. It shifts. It doesn't beg. It rearranges. And once you trigger that kind of ripple, there's no going back. And as we bring this to a close, take a second and let it sink in. If any part of this felt familiar, if it felt like it was pulling from moments you've lived through but never fully explained, then this message was meant to find you. So don't let it stop here. Support this movement by hitting like, subscribing, and sharing this with someone who needs the reminder. Drop 77 in the comments as a signal that you're done being underestimated and ready to stand in your full weight. This channel exists to keep bringing sharp, unapologetic energy to the chosen ones. Stay locked in. More is coming.